Hello, hello, everyone. Welcome, welcome. I'm Mike McMullen, president of the Chamber. I want to welcome you to this great annual event. We have Ted back, and people have asked if he's going to wear his AC/DC t-shirt, and I've been told no, he doesn't have it. So we're going to have to get him to wear like a Motley Crue one or something next time. And the reason we do that is because sometimes Ted's presentation can be a little dry, you know, and Ted's personality, he's not a real comedian, so we got to dress him up. And he actually did wear an AC/DC t-shirt for me, I don't know how many years ago, and people still, if you were here at that time, you'll never forget it. So anyways, let's get the meeting underway, and it's my pleasure to introduce you to the new chair of our board for this year, 2023, Mr. Brady Chapman, Director of HR at Penguin Random House. For Brady.
Thank you, Mike. Speaking of dry. So again, as Mike said, my name is this, can you hear me? Okay, don't hold it this close. So my name is Brady Chapman. I am the Director of HR at Penguin Random House, and I am happy to be serving as the chair of the board in its 99th year. So next year is the big 100. As we get started for the meeting, if everybody can silence their cell phones, make sure that they're off, we would appreciate it. Certainly want to thank you guys for coming today. Trust everybody's enjoying this food. Thank you to the Best Western. Yes. Oh, that applause wasn't on there, but so today is our annual Carroll County Budget Luncheon. You'll be hearing shortly from Mr. Ted Zaleski. He left. Where'd he go? He didn't want to hear you. Grand entrance. He's going to make a grand entrance. He's graciously been providing us informative insights into the county budget to chamber members for the past 21 years, and we look forward to what he has to say. So we will be hearing from him shortly. I want to thank the Community Media Center as well. They are streaming today's event, and they will be rebroadcasting it on, let me get this straight, Comcast Channel 19 and HD 1086, as well as YouTube and their website. And I'm supposed to wait for applause? That's right. Okay. Thank you. So allow me to introduce three sponsors that we have today. They will also be speaking here shortly. Sherry, Crazy and Bolin. Sherry. Dave Peliquin. And Richard Turner. Excellent. Okay, we got the applause. Okay. So I'd like to recognize at this time elected appointed officials with us today. So we have Diane Foster, Tawnytown Councilwoman. We have Cindy McCabe from the Carroll County Superintendent of Schools. Okay. Brian DiLeonardo from Carroll County Circuit Court and Associate Judge. Okay. Members of the Carroll County Board of Education. Tara Battaglia. Okay. Patricia Dorsey and Steve Whistler. Okay. Have I missed anybody? Okay. I'd like to also recognize Dr. James Ball, president of the Carroll Community College. Okay. And we also have, I believe there are 5 former past chairs of the Chamber of Commerce. So if you can stand to be recognized as well. Pay attention. Okay. Oh, you want me to say your names? Okay, okay. Steve, you were, I was going to say, I have to say it twice because you were chair of the board twice. Thank you, Steve. Steve, thank you. Okay. Any current board members, if you could also stand. Excellent. Okay. So today, sponsors are Brown, Schultz, Sheridan, and Fritz. Did I get there? Okay, okay. Main Street Advisors, LLC, and the Community Media Center of Carroll County. So our first sponsor will have a message. Sherry, if you could please join us.
Brady. Thank you. Sherry Cracy and Bolin with Brown Schultz, Sheridan, and Fritz, the CPA firm, aka BSSF CPAs, aka prior RLH CPAs, and regular layman and Houck PC. So everybody in Westminster should know us. We've been here for a long time on Main Street, East Main Street in Westminster was our very first office, and we've grown through mergers and additions to our offices to 5 locations. We have Frederick, Maryland, Hanover, Pennsylvania, Camp Hill, and Lancaster, Pennsylvania, as well as our Westminster office here. Normally, since this takes place in the midst of tax season, my big time of the year, I'd like to give a little tidbit of information, something that's new. So I just want to mention for any of the small businesses in here who have employees in Maryland, if you did not already register for SAVES, Maryland SAVES is the retirement program that they put in place. It's no cost to employers if you do not already have a retirement plan in place. That's what you're supposed to do. Now, you are also available to go in there and make yourself known as an exemption from the SAVES program if you already offer some sort of retirement plan to your employees. The reason it's important to do this is because if you all know that little painful $300 filing fee that everybody files with the Department of Assessments and Taxation, you are exempt from that if you go on to the Maryland SAVES website before December 1st each year and tell them that you're exempt from the SAVES program because you already have a plan in place. If you do that, you then do not need to pay the $300 filing fee each year. So if you missed it last year, December 1st, you kind of missed the boat for this year's filing. But make sure you go online right now and do it, and then you'll be able to get away without having to do that $300 filing fee next year. So that's my tidbit. There you go.
Thank you, Sherry. Next, we have Dave Peliquin.
They're telling me to go right to the podium.
Right to the podium. Professor Dave.
It'll slow it. It'll make it shorter.
That's right.
Afternoon, everybody. Dave Peliquin, Main Street Advisors, LLC, is a fiduciary registered investment advisory firm. Been in Westminster since 1999. I want to introduce my staff. I have Ann Mondo, our operations manager, 20 years in October.
Whoa.
Melissa Jordan, The temptation's going to be, when they look at the 5 and 10-year numbers, to put very little in foreign stocks. And I'm here to tell you, most pension plans, it's a ratio of 2 or 3 to 1 U.S. stocks to foreign stocks. So just keep that in mind. So if you've got, for $100,000, if you've got 40,000 in U.S. stocks, maybe 40,000 in bonds, the foreign should be 20. Foreign stocks have underperformed the U.S. for, since the crisis. And so if you look right now at your statement, you're going to find some of these foreign funds, developed Europe, are up 13, 14% as we speak. And some ask, why is that when everybody knows Europe's a mess, the Ukraine war, et cetera? They're so beaten up, they're so cheap that money is going there because of everything going on here. So that's the little tidbit, is don't ignore, because I see people come in and they got 7% in foreign stocks and 63% in U.S. stocks. And meanwhile, the world is about 30% U.S., 70% foreign. So that's my tidbit. As you can tell, I can kind of get carried away with the investment stuff. What I wanted to tell you about Main Street Advisors today is we've got it's a program called Trailblazer. It's subscription-based. It's really designed for very few people in this room because it's designed for younger people in their 20s and 30s who don't have, right? Hey. I'm looking around, folks. If you were up here where I am, you'd have no problem saying that. So your kids and grandkids, when you hear them talking, they're in their first job, 3rd year, and there's, credit scores. What about my 403B? Should I have life insurance? I got college loans. It's a $59.95 monthly subscription. And the way it works is there are a series of steps we take, identify 3 big things first meeting, and help them work at knocking out these concerns of theirs. $59.95 I think is a reasonable price, but everybody also has subscriptions that they know they should get rid of. So one of the first things we'll do with them is figure out what are they paying already each month, and is there 2 or 3 things they can do without or didn't even know they were paying. But we're kind of excited about putting that out there because the 20-somethings and 30-somethings are the ones that we're all counting on to keep working and keep putting money in the Social Security Trust Fund. So in that vein, if you've got kids, grandkids, have them check out our website. It's easy to find. With that, I'll pass on to, I guess it'll be Richard. Thank you.
Thank you. Quick short introduction. It's great to be here. Mr. Turner, Executive Director of the Community Media Center. And as always, I call this our annual rite of spring about to happen, to have Ted Zaleski here telling us about the budget and really sharing the information that's critical for us to understand all the moving parts and the lack of moving parts that exist in our county budget, right? That people don't really realize. So it's important for us to get the word out. That's why it's really a pleasure to be here as part of the Community Media Center. Brady already sort of did the push of, you know where to watch us, you know where to find us. If those subscriptions, I hope they cancel. I hope the ones that
Not that.
are not one of those subscriptions. But I want to say that I'm really excited about some of the things that we've been doing at the CMC, particularly with our local sports coverage, covering local high school and covering our community college. We're also in discussion now with their coverage as well. So it's really exciting to be able to bring some of the great stories that happen in Carroll County, not only to Carroll County, but because we are streaming this, it's across the globe. So they get to hear and see the stories about what's going on in Carroll County, good news. In particular, I don't know if we have a new star here among us. It was really a pleasure during coverage of our girls basketball to have Emily Bond or Miller be one of our stars to come in and be a commentator for girls basketball. So thank you, Emily. That's how we bring out some of the talent that's here in Carroll County. So we hope that, again, my big pitch, you know that Mike tells you to buy local, I tell you to watch local. So tune in, check it out, share it, let everybody know to tune in and check out our program. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Sherry. Thank you, Dave. Thank you, Richard. So we're going to go ahead and move to the next part of our program. I'm sure most of you know Ted Zaleski, Carroll County Director of Management and Budget. He's been with the county for 28 years, and he's been the Director of Management and Budget for 20 years. What you may not know is that he has also developed a podcast and websites called Two Sides to the Story, which focuses on books and reading, writers and writing, libraries and bookstores. He currently has 14 episodes out there right now. He lives here in Carroll County, just outside of Westminster, and we are excited to have him talk to us today about issues involving the county's fiscal year budget 2024 and beyond. So without any further ado, Ted?
Every year I prepare some talking points. In the half hour or so that I'm here, I always end up with another bunch of things to talk about. So I'll clear some of those out first. I had to go out to the car. It is raining now. I know a lot of people were worried about it. It's why my hair is a mess now. I went back and watched this from last year, and you might remember me saying it was the 20th time I was doing it, and I suggested that Mike was going to get me either a car or a beer. He suggested the beer, but I want everybody to know I haven't had a beer from Mike.
Now I owe you 3 beers.
AC/DC t-shirt. You know, I'm not sure how I feel about knowing that after you all have forgotten just about everything you ever knew about me, that AC/DC t-shirt is going to be the thing that you hang on to. I always try and mention a few things that are happening with people. Alan Schumann, who's been with the community college since it was founded in 1897, is going to be retiring in the near future. And where's Lynn Davis? She told me not to do this, but I'm going to. Lynn Davis at Youth Service Bureau has not formally announced her retirement yet, but is going to be leaving. And I particularly wanted to mention this because I can't even guess how many times I've said to people, you know, if you look around Carroll County at people who really do good work and get things done, I said Lynn Davis is right up at the top of that list. And we've got a problem here. This room is way too empty. Since we came back from COVID, the crowds have not rebounded. And this just isn't about me. You all don't know how this affects Mike. You know, he's going to go back to the office after this, close his door, and cry for a little while. So I think I know I have the solution, though. If every one of you next year would just bring one more person with you, we would have the room full.
I like that idea.
Make Mike happy.
Thank you. Make Ted happy.
So it's been an interesting few years. You know, we went through COVID, got through COVID, and everything that went along with that. And in many ways, we seem to be in a pretty good place right now. When I say we, you know, think about the county and how things are working. Unemployment is very low, although I always caution people, you need to think about what that is, because unemployment isn't always what people think it is. It's only measuring people who are actually looking for work. And we do have a kind of strange thing going on now where there's a lot of people who could be working who aren't working. Our revenues are stronger now than any time since the Great Recession, for sure, and probably going back a few years before that. I'll talk more about revenues in just a minute. And we've had a lot of economic development successes. You know, Carroll County is not Howard or Anne Arundel. We don't attract the kind of big projects that they get. But for what we do, we have a lot of things happening. There's a lot to be happy about. And I know you wouldn't believe it was me if I didn't say this, but we have to be careful. We can't get carried away with irrational exuberance. We'll talk about some other things on my mind, why I say that. But let's start with revenues. And I was thinking, I'm not sure I've ever said this here, kind of the core of my approach in projecting revenues. I'm going to take to the commissioners and say, here's how much money to work with. And I'm really guided by two things. One is I never, ever want to put the commissioners in a situation where I've told them you're going to have X number of dollars, and then during the year we figure out we're not going to have X number of dollars. Because they've made commitments to people all over the place on what services are going to be provided. And if there's not going to be enough money, all of a sudden you're trying to figure out, how do we undo this? And there's some places where it's not even an option. If we give a budget to Carroll County Public Schools, commissioners can't go back to them and say, we need to give you back, you need to give back $10 million. I guess maybe if they ask nicely, they. So property tax is our largest revenue. Group 2, county is divided into 3 assessment groups. Group 2, basically the northeast part of Carroll County, was the most recent reassessment. And average reassessment there was 23.9% increase. We've not seen anything remotely like that since back 2006, 7, somewhere back in then there. Okay, this often gets people thinking, wow, you have a ton of money coming in. But it doesn't quite mean that. Now first, remember, increases in assessments are phased in over 3 years. So first thing you have to do is divide 23.9 by 3. But then Carroll County has a 5% homestead tax credit, which means your tax bill can't go up more than 5% in any 1 year, no matter how much the assessment went up. So the 23.9 isn't what's happening to our revenue, it's what's happening to people's assessments. And it's a funny thing about assessments. Everybody wants their house to become more and more valuable, but nobody wants their assessment to go up. Creates for interesting conversations sometimes. So 5%, not 23.9, 5% increase in revenue from reassessments, but then we have to blend that with the other 2 groups, what were their last reassessments. When we do that, we get about 4%. So that's about how much growth we're going to see in property tax revenue from rising home values. 4% is not a big number, and when we look at changing costs that we need to deal with, it's nowhere near a big enough number, but 4% is actually the strongest position we've been in for a very long time. Group 3, which is Westminster and the Northwest, will be next year's reassessment, and we have them in our projections right now at 8%. There are some things we have to think about here, and again, one of these things we never know until we know, but we don't believe that all the growth that we've seen has been captured in all 3 groups yet. Because they're not going to be done until next year, even if house prices aren't rising next year, the State Department of Assessment and Taxation will be catching up with what's already happened. So we're not expecting another 24%. Maybe it'll be more than 8%, but we kind of felt like that was a reasonable place to go. But this is not an indication of what's going to happen in the future. We went through an unexpected boom in home prices and sales, but we're seeing that that's starting to slow down now, and no reason to think that what we've seen the last 3 years, we can just draw a line into the future now and build our plans on that. Income tax, our second largest revenue. This is an even bigger story than property tax. And those of you who have been around for this have heard me talk about it before. Income tax is very, very hard for us to project. We have too little information. It's very volatile. Things change quickly and for reasons that we don't know. But the last 3 years have been very strong growth in income tax. And it's another place where I've been offering caution. Said we really need to see that this is going to last before we start building our plans on it. I still don't have all the answers. I still don't have as comfortable a feeling as I would like to have. But there's no arguing now, I think, that we have seen fundamental change in income tax. And sometimes people think I'm being too cautious about income tax. But I want you to understand how much we actually have changed our projections. In the last 2 years, if you look back to what we were expecting to be getting and what we're building into our plan for next year, it's a more than $20 million more than we had been building into our plans. So we are reacting to the change, but there's still a lot of uncertainty. And you could look at the numbers we're seeing and saying, well, yeah, you upped it $20 million, but you could up it 25 million or 30 million, or pick your number. But I'm still left with, I'm going to need to see more before I'm going to tell the commissioners that they can count on this. And there's lots of things that go into this, but two of the really big things that lead us to caution is one, the state has a lot more data than we have. They don't give us details, but sometimes they give us a little bit of insight into what they're seeing. And one of the things that's happening is a lot of the change, not just in Carroll County, but statewide, is being driven by the wealthiest people in Maryland, a relatively small part of the population. And my taxes next year are going to look pretty much like my taxes last year. There are people that's not true. Their taxes can look very different from year to year. And that's where a lot of this money is. And then a subset of that is capital gains. Capital gains, however volatile income tax is, capital gains are much, much more volatile. The guy who used to run the revenue projections for the state would say capital gains are going to be somewhere between down 30% and up 30%, but I don't know which one. And recordation is our third largest revenue, much, much smaller than property tax and income tax, but big enough that we have to keep an eye on it. We've had several strong years here. Recordation basically is a 1% tax on the sale of property. We've seen many more sales of properties than we would have anticipated, and prices grew rapidly. And both of those things impact how much recordation tax we got. So we were significantly under budgeted in each of the last 2 years, and maybe even this year, but we are seeing things slow down, and we think we'll be going back to what we think is a sustainable, normal sort of level. Those things are not the whole story, but have contributed in a big way to unusually large surpluses for the county in the last several years. Another area where people often misunderstand or want to draw conclusions that probably they shouldn't. One thing, starting point, surplus by definition is one time. It's the result of what happened in 1 year's budget. So if you try and hire people, pay more, increase services, you're taking on ongoing costs with money that you only have one time. So of course I try to discourage that, but that doesn't stop people from coming to the commissioners with ideas all the time. The line goes around the block. And then sometimes people will challenge even the idea of, well, why should you have a surplus? If there's money left over, you taxed me too much, give me back my money. And the county, just like you in your personal lives, needs some flexibility for the things that you don't know. This is a part of that flexibility. Now, arguably, there's a point where if you have unusually large surpluses for a long time, maybe you need to rethink, is there something that needs to change so this isn't happening? I don't believe this is a long-term change, though. This is result of unusual times these last few years. So good news there for all of you, and there were a number of you who said to me before we started, are you going to have any good news? So yes, I gave you good news. Do you want me to just stop? Again, people who have been listening to this in the past know the county adopts a budget, and then 5 years of projected budgets are our operating plan. The last 3 years, again, for a number of reasons, that plan has been out of balance. We are overcommitted. We've taken on more costs than we know how we're going to pay with what we know today. What I just told you is going to make that situation a lot better. It's not going to make it go away entirely, though. So we do still have something we're going to need to deal with, and we're not far enough along in the budget process yet for me to say what that bottom line looks like, but that'll be coming in about a month. So we still have some work to do, and we know there's some things out there that are going to cost us money, things we're going to have to deal with that we haven't fully figured out yet. So those all have to eventually get built into the picture too. One of the big things we're dealing with is the creation of a combined fire and EMS force. We've depended on our volunteer companies for many years. We're several years now into the process of trying to create a county career force that will work with the volunteers. We are just now, with the exception of a couple administrative people, hiring the first people, the basic command structure, and then we're going to be hiring the people who actually be out on the road providing services in the very near future. So this is close to becoming real. You're going to see a change in how some of this works. This is going to be very, very expensive, though, and we still don't know exactly what that means. We keep getting closer and closer, but sometimes it seems like we're getting closer to understanding, and then another piece of this that hasn't been part of the puzzle yet is suddenly there, and say, okay, well, how much is that going to cost now? And when I talk about being overcommitted, fire and EMS is a big part of why we've found ourselves in an unbalanced situation. And I said this last year, but even this has changed. The number of people we're going to be hiring has increased since I talked last year. But the commissioners have something along about 750 employees, and we're looking at hiring something like 250 employees. So we're adding a third to our workforce. There's no getting around. That's big change. Blueprint for Maryland's future. I'm going to come back to this just in a minute. Had several people ask me about that before we got started too. And then other expenditure concerns. I could talk for the next half hour about other expenditure concerns. Just going to mention a few things. County has a landfill, northern landfill on Route 140. For years, we've been transferring most of our waste to Pennsylvania rather than putting it in the landfill because of concerns about running out of landfill space. Last year, we bought 300 and some acres around the existing landfill. So we're in the process now of figuring out what are we going to do there, what's that going to look like, how's that going to change operations. There's the potential for us to save a lot of money on the waste that we're transferring to Pennsylvania, but opening a new landfill is not an inexpensive thing to do. So that's still ahead of us to figure out. There's a chemical I've learned a lot about recently. I forget what the name actually is, but it gets called PFAs. Apparently it's everywhere. What I'm learning is if you have a well, you probably have PFAs in your well. The question is at what level, how large a concentration. But this is on the radar of the EPA and Maryland Department of Environment, and we're going to have to start dealing with some things. And we know a couple situations we're going to have to deal with. Again, hugely expensive. It's not like dumping bleach in your well and now you're okay. We're going to be spending a lot of money, and we don't fully understand what that's going to look like yet. And another interesting one, Piney Run Reservoir has a dam. It's how it got to be a reservoir. And we are being required to make some fairly substantial changes to that dam. When this first came up, there was a federal agency, I forget what it was now, we thought was going to be paying 65% of the cost or something like that. We're now hearing that that's not the case. So an expensive project is turning into a much more expensive project. And again, it's one of these things that, there's no choice. We don't decide whether we want to do it or not. It just has to be done. All that happiness wear off yet? Governor's budget. We always talk about this because the governor releases his budget in January. General Assembly session starts in January. There are some of us who start spending inordinate amount of time thinking about, okay, what's this going to mean for us? A few thoughts. The state's FY24 budget is a little bit smaller than the FY23 budget. But that doesn't mean what it would seem like it means, because the FY23 budget included a one-time appropriation of $2.3 billion into the state's rainy day fund. So you take that one-time change out of the mix, and your end numbers start looking a little bit different. Another complicating thing when trying to look at the state year to year is all the federal money that came out these last few years have made it very complicated to look at one year compared to another year and get an easy assessment of how has that changed. So we'll eventually get past that, but for a little while it's going to complicate things. Like I was saying about the county, in many ways you could say the state is in the best situation they've been in for a very long time, which is a good thing, but also a scary thing if you're me and you look at the world like this. My fear is that at the state, they will make some decisions that maybe they shouldn't be making, long-term implications with short-term money. And the pressures are great. There are a lot of people out there who want to see a lot of things done. Now I say the state is in the best situation they've been in a long time, but even there, if you look out a few years, you don't have to wait to say, is this going to change? Their current projections in 28 and 29 would have them about $1 billion a year short of being able to cover the costs that are already in place today. Another interesting thing at the state is going to be there's a change in how the budget works. Maryland was unique in the amount of power the governor had over the budget, or the lack of power the legislature had, depending on which way you want to look at it. That's changed. The legislature will be able to make changes now that they have not been able to make in the past. And it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. How much do they make use of that power? And the other thing that goes with it is the governor now will have a line item veto. So it's not just about agreeing to a budget or not. He can pull specific pieces out and say, I'm vetoing that. State budget, aid to local governments. Again, those of you who have been around for a while know that I'm always warning that aid to local governments doesn't mean what it seems to mean. 84.5% of aid to local government goes to the table back there with all the people in the Carroll County Public Schools. So if you have a state representative telling you all the money they're sending to counties, don't let them mislead you. It's not really what's happening. And that's not about saying they shouldn't fund the schools. I just hate the way they label this. Schools got their largest increase in a very, very long time. Another one that isn't quite what it looks like, though. Now, back to Blueprint. Blueprint for Maryland's future. Some of you who follows this stuff might remember back to the Kerwin Commission when they're looking how to improve education in Maryland. And a fatal flaw, I shouldn't say fatal, I mean this is still going to happen, a very bad flaw in that whole process was they very deliberately and consciously said, we're not thinking about money. All we're thinking about is how we should provide education. So the General Assembly got all these recommendations for things to do without anybody having considered money. Now they consider it and didn't do a very good job of it. There are lots of questions about how Blueprint is going to work, how schools are going to implement this, How's the timeline going to work? There are specific initiatives that I look at and say, that just doesn't make sense. It's not reasonable to think you're going to go from here to here with what you've put into place. But on the school funding specifically, I said they're getting a bigger increase than they've seen in a very long time, but it's not what it looks like. A large part of that money is restricted. It can only be used in certain ways. The school system has lots of expenditures that they need to deal with that don't fit those restrictions. And if you want to know more, you can talk with people at the school system, get a better explanation than I'm going to give you. But the basic idea is they're finding themselves in a situation where meeting the requirements of Blueprint and the way the state is saying has to be implemented is likely going to lead them to pull money from other purposes to meet the law. And a practical implication that many of you might be interested in is you could actually see in certain schools increases in class sizes as they try to work their way through how do we meet this law. It's going to be a problem for them. And another piece of Blueprint is this expands pre-kindergarten services significantly. And two big things in the mix there. As the state was putting this together, they made this assumption that the private sector was going to provide 50% of this pre-K. I don't know anybody outside of Annapolis who actually believes that that's possible, which is going to leave a very big question of, well, if it's not going to happen that way, then how is it going to happen? How is this going to work? And the other is, if you have more pre-K students, you need more space for pre-K students. We will likely be looking to add space. This was not a priority for Carroll County to add pre-K space. We're only doing this because the law changed. This is much like some years ago when full-day kindergarten was a change. We added a lot of classrooms. I don't even remember how many. But of course, this isn't free. And even if the state participates, unless they raise the size of the pot of money available for school construction, all they're doing is moving money to a pre-K project that would have gone to some other project. Community colleges, here's a good news story. I think the state did this actually to honor Alan as he's preparing for his retirement. Last 2 years, biggest increase in state funding for the community college that they've seen in a very, very long time. We don't talk about highway user revenue as much as we once did. This is state shared tax that counties and municipalities use for maintaining transportation systems. You might remember some years ago in the state budget problem, they took away 90% of the money that was going to local jurisdictions. For Carroll County, we went from $23 million to $1 million. That's bounced around a little bit in more recent years, $1 million, $2 million. I don't think it's been as much as $3 million. It looks like we might be getting a bit of an increase this year, but the information I've seen so far it hasn't been good enough for me to be sure of what I was looking at. But nothing even remotely like the funding we used to have. And a lot of people don't know this. Counties and towns maintain more miles of roads than the state does. Parks, another good news thing, state shared tax that funds a lot of what we do with parks. They borrowed some money a few times over the last few years. It's in the budget to pay some of that back. So that will be a help. Oh yeah, and school construction funding, I should have said this a little bit earlier. There is an increase in school construction funding, but remember a few years ago, the state started a parallel school construction process. The way we've done it for years is still there, but then they brought in the Maryland Stadium Authority to also do school construction. And there's money that is tied to casinos and debt being issued on money that's tied to casinos. And it's always a concern for me what happens if the casinos hit bad times or people decide to gamble in some other way. So in this state budget, Carroll County has the 5th largest change in the state. Again, maybe not quite what it looks like because it's almost primarily about the big change that the school system saw. And a piece of the state funding to schools, and something interesting for us to watch, is enrollment. You know, after years and years of watching Carroll County Public Schools get bigger and bigger and bigger, we hit a time where all of a sudden not only wasn't it growing anymore, but it was getting smaller and smaller. That had an impact on state funding to the schools. So part of what's happening now is we saw an increase of about 700 students, which helps with their funding. It's another one where I'm not anxious to say what this means for the future yet. You know, I kind of feel like we need to make sure that this isn't just a rebound from COVID when people pulled kids out of schools. How much of this is just putting back in schools and how much is actual growth? Yeah, I think we'll need a little while to see what that looks like. A few other things in my mind. Inflation. Things are not as bad as I think maybe some thought they were going to be. They're improving some, but costs are still rising quickly. And I tell the commissioners, you know, looking at the consumer price index for our purposes is not useful. That's not tied to the things that we're worried about for the most part. And there are places where we're seeing still pretty significant increases. Construction is getting better, but is still pretty big change. We have a lot of vehicles that operate on diesel gas. You know, that's still looks pretty bad. You know, there's a lot to be thinking about. Have to keep an eye on it. Sometimes people ask, well, how are you planning for inflation? And there's no one answer to that. You know, we try and look at different kinds of expenditures in different ways to say how do we try to match this to what we think, you know, might reasonably happen to us. And then one last good news thing, back to schools again. We have two significant projects that are well underway now, modernization and addition to the Career and Tech Center. If you drive by down Washington Avenue, you can see some pretty big changes. And the replacement East Middle School. We'll still see change there for a while because the old school will have to come down, but the new one is getting close to being up. There was a visitor to Carroll County not too long ago, a guy named Ernest Thompson was at Carroll Lutheran Village for a talk. For those of you who don't recognize the name, he's done a lot of things, very interesting life, but he's the guy who wrote On Golden Pond. But he was a Westminster High School graduate, but he said he graduated in '67, so I'm thinking that he graduated from what is now East Middle School when it was the high school. So he got to see his high school as a middle school being replaced by a new middle school. So as always, plenty more I could talk about, but I'll stop there and then we can take whatever questions you have. No.
Before we get too much into the specific questions about what you said, tell us a little bit about this podcast that you've created. I'm curious about. I think everybody wants to know about that, right? Ted's podcast.
Okay, and actually, I'd much rather talk about the podcast than this other stuff. But a coworker and friend of mine started a podcast. It's called Two Sides to the Story. You can see our website. It's twosidestothestory.com. The second two is a digit, though. We talk a lot about books and reading, how you read, why you read the way you do. Writers and writing, we haven't done a whole lot. That's part of what we see for the future. But then a big thing that we like to do is visit libraries and bookstores. And a lot of what we do is talk about how do we pick the books we pick? You know, what attracted you? How did you decide to get that versus that? We've done some trips. We have more planned. There are 14 episodes available now, and you can go to Google and Apple and Spotify and find them. They're also on our website. You can go see them all. And we also have a blog. I'm not sure how many blog posts there are now, but I guess maybe 70 of them. You know, us talking about this or that, aspects of, you know, the kind of things that I was talking about. And we're seeing where there's numbers available, we're seeing them grow. We don't have millions of followers yet, but the numbers keep going up. You have visits to the website, to the podcast hosts. We're on Instagram. We're seeing number of followers. A really fun thing is we're seeing regularly now people starting to follow us, and we don't know who they are. In the beginning, we knew almost every one of them. But now it's, do you know her? No, I don't know her. Yeah, so people are finding us. Oh yeah, and the other piece to this is we're very conscious of trying to promote independent bookstores. So a lot of what we're talking about will be exposing people to stores, and we're hoping to have interviews. In fact, those of you who know Debbie Scheller, the owner of Likely Story Bookstore down in Sykesville, we don't have it scheduled yet, but we're going to be doing an episode sometime in the near future with Debbie and talking about a likely story. So if everybody goes out to the podcast now, our numbers are going to jump really quick. Okay, what else?
What do you foresee, if anything, in terms of sort of surplus funds for one-time expense at the end of the year, that sort of thing?
Can we talk about the podcast some more? My recommendation to the commissioners will include some use of that to reduce the amount of debt that we plan to take on. There are some projects that maybe we didn't have in the plan yet, but we'll be able to put in the plan. But the full answer to that question will be taken up during our deliberations with the commissioners. So we're still a little ways from being able to really talk about that. And just for people who want to follow the process, the commissioners in April is when they put their big time into developing the proposed budget. Well, see, this is kind of depressing. Okay, well, I guess if there's nobody else, Mike, you have a few closing things, I think.
Round of applause.
I can't believe they didn't have any more questions for you, Ted. Thanks again, Ted, for coming here. It's very impressive what he does for us. He's been doing this, we said, like, this is the 21st year. He also runs our Leadership Carroll Day for local government. How many years for that?
Since 2007.
So it's like, what, 16 years? So, I mean, that shows what an amazing community that we have, people that give of their time. I mean, we're not paying him to come up here and talk. I just tell you right now. He's doing this. He doesn't need to do this. This is not part of his job description. So he's coming up here to help the community. Just like with Leadership Carroll, he gives his entire day. And Ted, I am very thankful for that. And I've been great. I've been here a little over 12 years. It's been great getting to know you. And you're not as dry as I thought you were when I first met you. That I do want to say. The AC/DC thing was amazing. So anyways, thank you again. I also want to thank our sponsors, Brown, Schultz, Sheridan, and Fritz, and Main Street Advisors and CMC. How about a round of applause for them? If anybody wants to sponsor any meetings, we still have a couple that are open. In fact, on your tables, you've got a little thing with our upcoming events. Our March 16th luncheon is going to be at Carroll Community College. They're going to be one of the sponsors. We could probably take another one. And our speakers are going to be Haven Shoemaker and Sheriff DeWeese. So that ought to be very entertaining. So please do sign up for that. I want to thank people, the staff of the Best Western. Nice job. The food was great. Maddie, is this from, where'd the food come from again? Santoni's. It was delicious. It was delicious. We're taking applications right now for the 2023 Carroll Biz Challenge. So if you know anybody that has a business that they've either just started up or they're talking that they'd like to start one up, this is the way to do it. I think this is our 12th year. I think this is year number 12. And the grand prize will be 10 grand in cash and 15 grand in other things. It's an amazing event that we do, and so it's designed for entrepreneurs, for local entrepreneurs. We're also accepting applications for the Leadership Carroll class of 2024. If you've been through Leadership Carroll, you know how amazing it is. We do this in conjunction with our friends at Carroll Community College. And if you've not talked to anybody, if you've not been through it, you need to sign up. Go on our website, sign up. It's a great, starts with an overnight retreat in September, and then it's second Tuesday of every month, October through June. And it's a different focus on different things in life here in Carroll. It's awesome to attend. Other than that, the other events we have here, please check these out. Supporting local means more than just shopping from people local and spending local. It means showing up, showing support. And there's no greater events to show up to show support than a grand opening. Somebody opens up a business. Ted, does that make you happy? Does extra money come in that you can spend if somebody's got a new business in town? He's always happy. He's always happy. Saturday, this coming Saturday, there is a ribbon cutting at Banner's Hallmark. We have a Hallmark store coming in to Westminster again. So, and they've got the grand opening going. Steve, was that you saying that you don't like it? Okay. There was something happening. The actual grand opening itself goes from 10 to 3 or whatever. And if you like music, my son's going to be there. He's going to play. They hired him to play. So that is reason enough to show up. We have some more ribbon cuttings. We have one at Ting, March 9th. We have a PM Connection, February 23rd and March 23rd. So other than that, and we have a couple of trips. So if you like to travel, a lot of you have been on our trips. We're going to Scotland in April, and we're going to Egypt in November. And that trip is amazing with a 3-night cruise down the Nile. So other than that, are there any announcements, any big events coming up? We have a couple. I guess that means you're tired of hearing me talk. Brady for sure is. The meeting's adjourned. Thank you so much.